Hey guys, Sharpend here. In this video I'm going to show you how to make glitchy drum samples using granular synthesis. The original drum loop sounds something like this. And here's the granular version. And in addition to that, I'm also going to show you how to use a few external effects to turn these granular loops into even glitchier drum sounds. They sound something like this. So this video is based on a request that I got recently about making glitchy drum samples. So I'm going to show you how I do these using granular synthesis. And before I start with complex drum loops, I'm going to use this snare to demonstrate how the different parameters of granular synthesis can affect your sound. So let's start by looping our sound. And now let's go over the important parameters. So you have wave spacing, which means into how many grains it's going to cut up your sample into. So the closer it is to 0%, it's going to cut it into more grains so that it will sound glitchier. And the further it is, it's going to cut it into less grains. So you get a less glitchy sound. And if you go into the -% zone, it just changes the playback direction like this. So it's still pretty similar. And then you have grain spacing, which means the space between each grain. So if you increase it, there's going to be more space between each grain. And if you decrease it, all of the grains are going to be more cluttered. And then you have attack and hold. Basically, attack means how long until the grain reaches its peak volume, and hold means how long it's going to stay in that volume. So if you increase the hold, you get bigger grains, basically. Same for the attack. So let's increase the grain spacing and check it out. And if you have shorter holds, it's going to sound a lot faster. And you can get weird like flanging effects with these. And then you have the random knob, which just randomizes the position that it's going to start playing the sample from. So one grain can be at like the start of the sample, another grain can be in the middle. It's just random. So this creates a very weird effect, and it also sounds like it's being sped up. But you can increase the hold to counter that effect. And then you have depth and speed. Depth means the amount of modulation that goes into wave spacing, and speed means the speed of the LFO that modulates wave spacing. So basically this changes the amount of grains that it's going to cut a sample into using an LFO that you can control its speed using this parameter and the amount of modulation using this parameter. So that way, without the random knob, you can create really interesting effects just with the wave spacing modulation, like this. And once you introduce the random knob, you can get even more interesting effects. So now let's move on to our drum loop that sounds like this. And basically my suggestion is to just loop it and then fiddle with these parameters until you find something that sounds good to you. So let's do just that. Let's add some depth, reduce the speed. And then you can change it using the grain spacing. And maybe add some random. Something like this. So now that you have this sort of granular loop, you can then record a long bit of it. And I also like to pitch it up quite a bit because I think it sounds a bit better. So let's do that. And then just record for a little while the loop that you get from this sound. So now that we have our loop that sounds like this, I'm going to show you how you can use some external effects to make it sound more interesting. So let's just zoom in on that loop and send it to this mixer track. Basically, I always suggest to have these three effects on at all time. So this is a camel crusher. It just adds a bit of distortion. And then you have the compressor, which just makes sure that the low peaks and the high peaks are more close to each other, so you get a more compressed signal. So this means that even the quieter parts of your loop are going to sound louder and not that different from the loud parts of your loop, which is great. And then a limiter, because the effects that we're going to add now might clip this loop way beyond 0 dB. So we're going to avoid that by limiting our loop to 0 dB. And then let's take a look on all of the other effects that might help you glitch out your drums. So this one is called Derez. It's a free plugin, and it does a really nice effect, sort of like beat crushing. And you can get really nice results with that. And then you have Regressive, which is another free plugin, and it does similar things. Just play with the presets, you'll find something that sounds good all of the time. Then you have Boyds, which is another free plugin. It's a granular delay, and it does a lot of weird things as well. My suggestion with this one is to just move these knobs randomly, or even just click on the randomize button until you find something interesting, because there are a lot of different parameters, and I think a nice way to deal with that is to just randomize them to see what you get. And then there's delay, which might sound traditional, but if you remove tempo sync and set it to really short settings, like at around 1 ms till like 40 ms, you can get really interesting results. And you can then mess with these results by changing it to ping pong mode or stereo mode, reduce the feedback or increase the feedback, add some distortion here or remove the distortion, like that. You can also modulate the time of the delay to create really interesting pitching effect. And that way you can get really interesting results just with a delay. And then there's also a little alterboy, which is a pitch shifting plugin, but it sounds really interesting once you use it on drums. I like the robot mode. So with all of these plugins you can get really interesting results, and the cool thing about rendering it to audio is that you have the clean audio right here. And you can always choose to add which effect that you want and then remove it at certain parts, maybe modulate the effects to go in and out at different times. And that way you can create really interesting granular drums that are always changing. And that is pretty much it. If you found this tutorial helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And let me know in the comments below what subject do you want me to cover up next time.